This video is brought to you by our Patreons. If you want to make sure that we can create more content like this, consider supporting us on our Patreon. Thank you. Chapter 17 is about changes in magnitude in the price of labor power and of surplus value. The amount of stuff needed by a person just to survive changes on some different factors, such as, for example, environmental factors. So this, of course, plays a role when it comes to determining the value of labor power. The other two factors are the cost of development of labor power. So really, how expensive it is to teach people skills. Now, the three things that determine the, quote, magnitudes of surplus labor and of price of labor power are: number one, the length of the working day. Number two, the intense magnitude of the labor. So just how intense is the labor? How much labor are you actually doing in a given amount of time? And number three, the productivity of labor. Marx now looks at three different scenarios in which these factors either remain constant or vary. Scenario number one is what happens when the length of the working day and the intensity of labor remain constant, but the productivity of labor varies. So when only productivity varies, pretty much. Alright, now a bunch of things happen. Total value remains the same. The value of labor power and surplus value vary sort of inversely. If one goes up, the other has to go down, and vice versa. However, the proportion changes may differ here. Variation in magnitude of surplus value is always a consequence of change in the value of labor power. The amount of reduction in the price of labor power depends on the struggle over the fruits of the increases in productivity. But increasing productivity can result in both workers and capitalists getting more. Ergo, both constant and falling prices of labor power can be accompanied by a rise in the real standard of living. Alright, on to the second scenario. Scenario number two is what happens when the length of the working day and the productivity of labor remain constant, but the intensity of labor is variable. Greater intensity means more output, but also more value, so really no change in value per unit. Increasing intensity of labor means that workers are getting tired faster, increasing the cost of maintaining the same quality of labor power. Ergo, the rise of the price of labor power may not fully compensate for that deterioration. Scenario number three. Scenario number three is when productivity and the intensity of labor remain constant, but the length of the working day is varied. If the working day is shortened and the value of labor power remains the same, the surplus value is reduced, and vice versa. Both the price of labor power and surplus value can increase, but the proportions of how much they increase here really depends on the struggle between the capitalist and the worker. If it's sort of going well for the workers, then the price of labor power will increase more sharply, and if it's going well for the capitalists, the surplus value will increase more sharply. Scenario number four looks at a simultaneous variation of all of these circumstances. Marx discusses two specific cases here, which I really can't be bothered to get into right now, so I'll just put them up on the screen and just tell you real quick what the situations are. Also, honestly, I don't think they're that important. The first one is a decline in productivity and an increase in the working day. That's what happens then. Go ahead and pause the video right now if you want to read the effects, since, as I previously mentioned, I can't be bothered to get into it right now. And the second one is a shortening of the working day, but an increase in intensity and productivity. That's what happens then.